One of the moves that Chicago Bulls made this offseason was bringing in point guard Josh Giddey, leaving many Bulls fans to ask and question, are the Bulls doing the best by Coby White in the development that he showed last season and moving him off ball while bringing in Josh Giddey to do the ball handling duties? We'll talk a little bit about that. Plus, Evan Sidri kind of confirms what we've been hearing about a potential Zach LaVine trade. And should the Bulls be looking to pursue Kessler Walker? Is it even feasible? We'll take a look at all that, plus a mailbag right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Terry Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content today, y'all. So, Coby White, the topic. Coby White, who was a player last year that I talked about being deserving to be the story for the Chicago Bulls last year, right? Just stepping up in every aspect of the game, leading the league in minutes for a large portion there before he went down with injury. Him and DeMar DeRozan were at the top of minutes played, clutch minutes played, everything just you kind of look at from a player. Coby White brought that in a lot of ways for the Chicago Bulls, really just stepping up and adding to his game so much last year. It was more than just the numbers. While you saw a major increase in basically every statistical category last season, it was more than just what the numbers dictated. Coby White was a leader on the court last season for the Chicago Bulls. He stepped up in a lot of big moments, and in a lot of games, he was the reason why the Bulls were able to stay in games. Now, unfortunately, Billy Donovan took the ball out of his hands at times in fourth quarters and things like that because DeMar DeRozan is the more proven closer. And then Coby White also unfortunately had a bit of games where he kind of dipped his performance and he couldn't keep it up, and that was due to like fatigue and things like that. But when it came down to it, Coby White, 19 points per game last year, 44% shooting, 37% shooting from three, taking 7 3-pointers per game, the most of his NBA career, 5 assists, almost a steal per game, 4.5 rebounds per game as well. Like, Coby White took major steps everywhere. And that was really good to see from Coby White. And, for a Bulls team that has, questioned the development of young players that we've done here over the last few years, seeing Coby White do all those things was a really good thing to see. And so, now, with bringing in Josh Giddey and the potential of moving Coby White off ball, again, this is kind of assuming what we don't still know what's going to happen with Zach LaVine, right? We don't know where Zach LaVine's going to end up. It'll be an interesting starting lineup for Josh Giddey, Coby White, and Zach LaVine to be all out there at the same time. But with Josh Giddey not necessarily being the biggest offensive firepower and playmaking, rebounding, his ability to get to the mid-range and that spin move that he has being kind of his biggest assets, it's raised a fair question on where does this leave Coby White in his ascension? Can Coby White ascend to the level of being like an all-star and continue that? Can he get over 20 points per game? And honestly, there's a reason to believe that, yes, playing next to Josh Giddey will help unlock a lot of what Coby White brings scoring-wise. But then you got to ask, how much was of Coby White's strengths come off of him being the starting point guard? And, it's a mixed bag here. You guys know I like to get in the weeds sometimes with lineups and things like that. When you really look at it for Coby White, just fact of the matter is the two most effective lineups that he had last season for the Chicago Bulls, both those lineups had him with other ball handlers and really sharing the ball handling duty. Coby White's most potent lineup was him, DeMar DeRozan, Ayo Dosunmu, Nikola Vucevic, and Patrick Williams. That lineup, the Bulls outscored opponents by an average of plus 12 points in those possessions that they had. That's per 100 possessions. Then you look at the second best lineup that Coby White was a part of. That was with him, Ayo Dosunmu, DeMar DeRozan, Patrick Williams, and Nikola Vucevic. Again, one of the best lineups, again, out there. So, again, it's pretty much the same thing, right? I'm sorry, Alex Caruso. Did I say Alex Caruso? His second best lineup was Coby White, Alex Caruso, DeMar DeRozan, Nikola Vucevic, Patrick Williams. Basically the same exact lineup. You're just flipping Ayo Dosunmu for Alex Caruso in that case. And either one of those lineups had Coby White playing a decent amount of off-ball. Matter of fact, Coby White on offensive possessions, there was about 50-50, more so 43%, so a little bit under 50-50, was Coby White playing on ball. So, being the on-ball point guard. And so, because of that, Coby White has already shown an ability to share a backcourt and still be productive when you have other ball handlers. DeMar DeRozan, Ayo Dosunmu had split those ball handling duties with Kobe White. The time that Kobe White had the most ball handling duties is when he's out there with Alex Caruso instead of Ayo Dosunmu, and that's because we know how well Alex Caruso does move off ball. And then you also have to look at the Bulls and where they're potentially going style-wise. And being a team that's going to try to play faster, the ball's going to move around more in general, and Kobe White's still going to have a large portion of ball handling duties. The ball's going to be in Kobe White's hands. The question is it going to be in his hands as much as Josh Giddey is not an off-ball player, but so was DeMar DeRozan. Actually, if you look at the two lineups that potentially that Kobe White's going to be involved in the most, Zach LaVine is a solid off-ball player. And even if you flip that and Zach LaVine's gone, you're either looking at Matas Buzelis, who is probably already going to move into one of the best off-ball players that the Chicago Bulls have, just because that is one of his strengths, his ability to move off-ball. And then you have potentially maybe Patrick Williams sliding into the threesome as well. And Patrick Williams is a player that just doesn't have the ball in his hands a whole lot. So there's going to be more than enough. And Billy Donovan's already shown an ability to handle multiple ball handlers. And Kobe White, in what he showed, and even last year, one of the things that I said that stood out is that Kobe White's ability to be effective off ball, not necessarily saying that I want him to be solely off ball, is going to be kind of the next thing that you're going to look at with Kobe White's game and ask himself if he can take advantage of that. Kobe White is already in kind of some elite territory when you look at certain things in his game right now. Ball handling, he is in the 91st percentile in ball handling. That means that taking 3 steps or more with the ball, he has ball handling ability. Then when you look at his assist total, he's in the 76% assist total. He has an assist percentage, actually 20.4%. So he is, those things do point towards he's a really good on-ball player as well. And I think that this is a thing where it brings about some questions. And in no way am I saying it's going to be the seamless fit of Kobe White, he's going to be perfect playing off ball. And I don't even know if that's going to be necessarily the role, just because you bring in another point guard, but it's about the style of play that makes sense as well. And when we saw Kobe White the most effective, as well as when ball handling duties were shared as well last season, that's in that December month where everybody really the Bulls played a style of basketball that many Bulls fans have been asking the Bulls to play for a long time. That's when Patrick Williams had his most impressive season. That's when DeMar and Zach were both out for a little bit of stretch there. That was a time period where the Bulls played, I think, the closest thing that we're going to see to what the Bulls stylistically are going to try to play this upcoming year. The addition of Matas Buzelis as well is going to add to the Bulls being a more potent off-ball player. Taking away Alex Caruso, it definitely causes some concerns for that as well. So I don't want to overlook that. But then when you look at the month of December for Kobe White, 22 points per game. He did that on 46% shooting and 40% shooting from 3, taking 8 3-pointers per game. He also had 5.7 assists, 6.4 rebounds, and that is the stylistically where you're probably going to see the Bulls be most aligned to in what they did last season. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be one for one in that. A very different lineup, a very different style of play. Roster construction is going to play a part into that. But when you look at it, the Bulls are really building this roster of players that can be more effective off ball. And the question is how well does Kobe fit into that? Now, Billy Donovan, Arturas Karnisovas, they've both said things that have alluded to they do not want to change how many shots that Kobe White's getting. They don't want to change his priority in the offense, his prioritization in the offense. And even with Zach LaVine coming back, you look at the fact that DeMar's gone, there's more than enough reason to think and believe that Kobe White is still going to get his shots. The question is how he gets those shots now with being more of an off-ball player. And that's if that even happens, right? Yes, we're assuming that Josh Giddey is going to be the starting point guard. I would think for what you gave up, I would think for kind of what you see this roster, Ayo Dosunmu kind of being a more well-rounded player as well off the bench, that you're probably going to see Josh Giddey in that starting lineup. But again, that's up to Billy Donovan to take a look at it in training camp and to kind of determine what his best lineups and situations are. But Kobe White taking that next step, that's always been something that we've hoped. That's always been something that we looked at, and he took a step last season. Now, in not having a player like DeMar DeRozan out there and adjusting to how defensive keys in on him, that's going to be an important part of Kobe White's next step. And I would say this, it's also going to be an important part of maybe why the Bulls are looking at him being more off ball. If they're actually running a more fluid offensive system with more ball movement, that's where Kobe White can be dangerous. Again, him coming off screens to then get the ball in his hands to make a decision, whether to shoot, drive, kick it off, get other players open. That's how you kind of expect Coby White to be used next season. But again, this is a Billy Donovan coach team. You can take nothing for granted. You can assume nothing when it comes to Billy Donovan coaching your team and your offense. But Coby White moving into his age 24 season, he'll turn 25 in February, so a little bit over halfway through the season. This is an important part of Coby White's next step and the Bulls' development on where the roster is going to go to see how well Coby White plays off ball. And then again, when you're looking at the modern NBA as well, it's less about true positions and it's more about how you're used in those positions. So even Coby White moving theoretically to the 2, he could still share and have a lot of ball handling. And considering when you look at it, he actually could have about the same amount of ball handling duties that he had last year. That usage rate of 23.2, I wouldn't expect that to change very much for Coby White. I just wouldn't. I think that he's still going to be a player that is given plenty of opportunities to make the decision. But Josh Giddey is going to have those, share those with him. And he may be a better suited player to do that as Josh Giddey himself is in the 91st percentile in ability to create open shots for teammates. So take a look at that. Something I wanted to talk about. Coby White moving into next season. As we get closer to the season, I'll kind of do individual videos on each player and what I kind of expect or want to see from them in the 2024-25 season. But Coby White is still a player that I still hope and think that he's going to make another step and he's going to be prioritized by this Bulls team. And we'll see what we have in Coby White. But let me know what you guys think down below. How concerned are you that with Josh Giddey coming in here, moving Coby White potentially off ball, how much are you worried about that disrupting what we saw from Coby White last season? Keep in mind, taking into consideration that DeMar DeRozan did have the ball in his hands a lot in the half-court situations as well. Let me know what you guys think on that down below. But moving on from that, we got continued confirmation that this thing between Zach LaVine and the Chicago Bulls seems to be moving towards a direction where these sides are going to have to man up and figure out and fix their relationship for the betterment of what both parties ultimately seem to want, and that's a parting of the ways. Evan Sidri confirmed that that the Bulls remain hopeful on a Zach LaVine trade, but the market has appeared to dry out even more than what it was before. Specifically mentioning teams like the Kings and the Warriors, which were two teams that were probably had the highest interest still left in Zach LaVine, going in different directions. The Kings with DeMar DeRozan, the Warriors with Buddy Hield and other players that they've brought in, kind of a conglomerate of players there. And so Zach LaVine and his $138 million left on his contract over 3 years seems to be in a place where, as we're moving to the new CBA, the second tax apron, teams still trying to kind of figure out how they want to build teams with that second tax apron being there. It seems that market for Zach LaVine is gone, and this is something that we've all expected, we've all heard, and it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that it seems like the Chicago Bulls just aren't going to be able to move Zach LaVine before the start of the season. Now, that means that both sides are going to have to come to the understanding that Zach LaVine is going to start off this season with the Chicago Bulls, and at that point, Zach LaVine is going to have to try to fit into what this Bulls team is doing, but it also help his value. He is going to have to play some of his best basketball. And the Bulls are going to have to hope that in Zach LaVine playing that basketball as well, that best basketball, that it does help increase his trade value and leading towards the trade deadline where other teams have injuries, teams feel and realize, hey, we need a little bit more. We feel like we're right there if we can get some scoring in here. Zach LaVine can fit in our system. And then when you pair that with Zach LaVine's recent tweet of stay present, lock in, I think that all kind of points towards Zach LaVine also realizing that Zach LaVine has to stay locked in as well. And so this is a big season for Zach LaVine, mainly because he has to find a way to stay healthy. He does. Now, while we've talked about, and I do agree that Zach LaVine, the conversation around Zach LaVine has almost gone to a point now that I think can get to a place of us being able to say that it's gotten almost too far left, right? And Stephen Noe had a great article on Zach LaVine and talking about that out of the over 100 of teammates that Zach LaVine's had in his NBA career, 70-something of them are no longer in the NBA, right? Now, that's not the end-all, be-all. He's played for over 10 coaches as well. Zach LaVine is still a productive player. And the fact that the conversation is switched now to seemingly make Zach LaVine out to be this terrible basketball player, that's just not facts. Now, he is a flawed basketball player, as most basketball players are. And the contract paired with those flaws and the questions around his health has led us to a place where it's extremely hard to move Zach LaVine. If Zach LaVine, I've said it before, even if he was on a $28 to like $35 million deal, Zach LaVine would probably be moved by now. If he didn't have the injuries that he's had over the last couple of years, even though they're not like lingering issues, there are more so nagging injuries left there, that also would point probably towards Zach LaVine being able to be moved. It's a combination of where everything is right now for Zach LaVine, and he finds himself still remaining on a team that's clearly going in a different direction, but him and Vooch are still a part of this team because of either their inability to move them, or when it comes to Vooch, I do think part of it is the Bulls just know they don't have a starting caliber center behind after Nikola Vucevic goes, but you take that for what you will. So it's just interesting to watch like this, the saga of Zach LaVine and all this and how it's come down. It sucks. I'm sure it sucks for Zach. I'm sure it's frustrating for Zach and his agent, so much so that Rich Paul had to come out and make the comments that he made as far as Zach LaVine being professional, which isn't really a big question. Like, to me, I know it comes down to it, but yeah, man, Zach LaVine is still a solid enough player, and you still get fans from other teams consistently pointing out the fact of like, hey, Zach LaVine, come here. Like, we'll take Zach LaVine, but it's about their team ending up being in a position to be able to trade for that contract to Zach LaVine. But everything seems like Zach LaVine's going to be in a Chicago Bulls uniform at the start of next season, and that's just kind of what it is. But moving on from that, from another player that's going to be in a Bulls uniform next season is Nikola Vucevic. Now, Walker Kessler is reportedly available by the Utah Jazz, and a lot of Bulls fans want the Bulls to fix an issue that many Bulls fans have talked about for a long time, and that is drafting Dalen Terry over Walker Kessler. At that time, the Bulls did not have Andre Drummond. We needed shot blocking. We needed rim protection. We needed some rebounding. And Walker Kessler, regardless of how you look at his offensive game, he brought those things defensively. And that's where it comes down to a lot of Bulls fans hoping that the Bulls could get this. But again, per Evan Sidgery, it seems like the Utah Jazz have been offered multiple first-round picks for Walker Kessler. Take that for what you will. And that pretty much prices the Bulls outside of Walker Kessler. I don't see the Bulls. Now, had the Bulls kept the team together, maybe it would be different. If they still went down the direction of competitiveness rather than going younger, maybe they would have done that. Even though Walker Kessler, only 22 years old, he'll turn 23 here in like 2 weeks as well. So still an extremely young player. And then you look at Walker Kessler and what he's been able to bring. Last season for the Utah Jazz, playing 23 minutes per game, 8 points per game, 7.5 rebounds per game. But the key thing is there, 2.4 blocks per game coming off the bench, playing 23 minutes is huge. But then Jalen Smith's numbers, when you look at it, aren't that far off from what Walker Kessler brings. And Jalen Smith averaging 9.9 points per game, 5.5 rebounds per game, 1 assist per game. But the blocks are a very different thing there. Less than a block per game for Jalen Smith. So could the Bulls trade Nikola Vucevic for Walker Kessler? I don't see the Jazz being interested in that. This is something that some Bulls fans have heard conversations or saw conversations around. You look at Walker Kessler's contract, he's making a little over $2 million. Nikola Vucevic is making 10 times that, and so matching that salary for the Utah Jazz would mean them probably having to give up a piece that they want to keep to match the salary. Now, one thing with the Utah Jazz, though, is that they would just have to match the percentage based off of it required by the CBA, because the Utah Jazz are still 40-something million dollars beneath the first tax apron. So again, they don't have that in true cap space, but they do have some flexibility there if they want to move on and move in a different direction and take on some salary. The Jazz are in a position where they can take on some extra salary, and still remain under the luxury tax. I just don't see it happening, not for Nikola Vucevic, unless it's part of a 3-team trade. And even then, with what reportedly Walker Kessler is getting, they're getting offered for Walker Kessler out on the free agent market, the trade market. I just don't see the Bulls getting involved in that personally. But let me know what you guys think on that down below. Before we go, we got one voicemail I want to get into. This one's from Reginald.
Hey, this is Reginald from Columbus, Georgia. Just coming off last thing you guys talked about. You guys talked about DeMar heading to the Kings. How I feel about it is simply a great player, or at least a very good player, and giving great showing. He deserves the standing ovation he's going to get when he comes back to Chicago, and I just hope for the best for him. After a Chris Duarte, I figure we'll probably trade him to a team like Charlotte for like a 2026 second round pick and keep it moving. I also think that when it comes to that second two-way spot, the dark horse for that is Nathan Knight. I've seen him play for the last couple of years in Summer League and G League, and the spot minutes he managed to get with Minnesota, I like what I saw. He's undersized at 6'8", but he has a mid-range shot, and he can occasionally hit a three, so I don't have a problem with that. Him getting the two-way wouldn't be a bad thing, but whoever gets it is going to be in the G League regardless. So for now, I'll leave all options open. Hopefully the Bulls will use that, I want to say biannual, to resign Javonte. But what's your opinion? Thanks.
All right, Reggie, I agree with you. Like, shout out to DeMar DeRozan. The message that he left as far as leaving Chicago, even pointing out that, hey, at least you only have to face me 2 times a year. You know, it just shows the class act that DeMar DeRozan was while he was here, right? I've had my issues with DeMar DeRozan, and I do have a video planned in me talking about kind of my, over the years, my discontent with DeMar DeRozan, more so for his play style, not for the player, not for the person that he is. But, you know, I wish DeMar DeRozan the best, and I hope that he does and is able to compete for something meaningful over this last part of his career. Now, as far as Chris Duarte, I agree with you. Chris Duarte, even though I did a video on him last night on does he have a chance to be an underrated acquisition for the Bulls, I still think more likely than not he's going to be involved in a trade if the Bulls do make a trade. I just think that that's the case. I think that, you know, he still has some ability to maybe turn his career around. I just don't know if that opportunity exists for him for real in Chicago. If it does and he earns a role, shout out to him. But I do think the more likely scenario is that Chris Duarte will be traded. Now, I don't know about to the Charlotte. You have a whole destination. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but I do think that he could be moved. As far as Nathan Knight on the two-way deal, I don't think so. I think that we know now it's going to be either Domas or Henry Drell for that two-way deal. The Bulls signing Domas as an undrafted free agent right away, to me, points to that. That's something that we've seen from the Bulls. Nathan Knight is probably still going to be on the Windy City Bulls if he doesn't go to another team on a two-way, but I don't see him competing for that last two-way spot personally. That's my personal opinion. And then as far as your last question, as far as using the biannual to sign Javonte Green, right now we don't have a roster spot. We have a full 15-man roster. So unless a deal is coming to where we send out more players than we bring back or earn a lot, but team is his non-guaranteed deal is removed from the team, right now we don't have a spot for Javonte Green. And that's unfortunate because I think Javonte is another one of those players that, even though older and doesn't necessarily fit the age timeline that the Bulls are, he's a vet that can help this Bulls team understand how to sacrifice, where to give, those type of things. That's just my personal opinion. And overall, I just love Javonte Green. But great voicemail there, Reginald. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. That's thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.